should introduce myself. Charles Harbaugh, Mayor of Middletown, Vice President, Cedar Creek Battlefield Foundation. Been a board member for 10 years, lifelong resident, mayor for 14 years. I wrote a book about Middletown.
Yeah.
I give a solid tour. I'm not the best. The best is Dr. Noyalis or Professor Whitehorn. Professor Whitehorn wrote this big book, and he is the leading advocate, but he's like getting in his 80s now. But he can give like a 3-hour tour and tell you what core and what, you know, and all these things that are great. But so I give the Reader's Digest version of tourists. So that's what the national park thinks. So that's why we're allowed to have a reenactment, because we own this field here, and so reenactments are really good for getting people to think about things. So that's why it's so confusing. So we'll start our walk here a little bit ago, and we'll head to the Cedar House here. So some things that I want to talk about. Middletown, probably one of the better preserved towns in the Shenandoah Valley, maybe second. Tom's Brook is getting there. We have 2,100 acres of preserved land in town and around here. There's only 4 homes from here to the interstate in Strasburg that are not preserved on the right-hand side of the road. And we're getting new properties all the time. It's just, it's getting expensive to fundraise for. Land is through the roof. People from the city are coming out here driving up these prices. Land used to be $20,000, $30,000 an acre. It's approaching 50, 60 if it has different types of residential or commercial designations. So that drives up the cost of land. So 2,100 acres of preserved land. We're very proud of that. I think in the future, you guys come here in 10, 15 years, everything will be preserved on the right side of the road. There'll be those last 4 houses. Some of those are in easements and set to be torn down after the people live there pass away or whatever. So you'll see some parts of this place will be preserved more. So I really want to talk about that and make sure that you understand that. So what's happening here in 1864? Okay, we start off with the Confederate Army is in Petersburg. General Lee has his troops there, and it's becoming very much like a World War I style battle. People are dug in trenches, and Lee knows that he's got to get pressure off of his army. And since Grant has taken control, he's really pressed. They have not worried about casualties like previous Union commanders have, and they've been like pressing the attack because they know that they have more men than the South does, and they can afford to lose more people. And so this is when a lot of the big casualties happen. Battle of the Wilderness, Battle of 7 Days, the big cavalry battles. This is when they're taking place. So Lee sends General Jubal Early here, who served under Jackson, to the Shenandoah Valley. His goal is to threaten the North, harass the North, threaten supply lines, and this is the breadbasket of the Confederacy. This is the armies, this is where they're getting fed from, these area farms. Belle Grove has a huge farm here. There's tons of crops that are being grown around here. So this is very key and strategic for the Confederacy at this time. So it's critical that they hold the valley. Now, this goes better than I think General Lee thought. The Confederates got all the way to the gates of Washington, D.C. And you don't think about this in 1864. You think desperate, maybe a little bit of Germany, 1945 at the complete end is what you're thinking about typically in 1864. But the Confederacy they get there, but they can't kick the door in when they get to D.C. There's just too many troops there that push them back. But they had a series of wins through 1864 that led them right, through Monocacy, right all the way to the nation's capital. That's the impressive part. Then they start getting rolled back. 3rd Winchester, huge loss for the Confederates. Fisher's Hill, big loss to the Confederates. Tom's Brook, big loss to the Confederates. Confederates are reeling mid-October 1864. And Lee has sent Jubal Early a letter saying, you have to hold. I'm going to reinforce you with General Kershaw's division. You've got to figure this out in the valley to take pressure, to keep Sheridan and his troops, General Phil Sheridan's troops, that are in Winchester, that are here, that have been beating Jubal Early all late summer long, to keep him from joining them in Petersburg and tightening the noose on Lee. So Jubal Early, looking for an answer, he sends one of his generals, John B. Gordon, and a map maker, Jedediah Hotchkiss, to the top of Signal Knob. And this is the worst view of Signal Knob right now, but trust me, it is right behind those trees right there. And it's a great elevation point. And he can see that there's a gap in the Union lines here. And they develop this plan of attack. And it's a last gasp for the Confederates. And they're thinking one big victory here could really change the tide for a couple of reasons. So we'll continue our walk here, and we'll talk about those reasons, and I'll pull them out of you. So, October 19th, 1864, you think the Civil War is coming to an end, but the people in the North don't know that when they see these huge death tolls in the newspaper. They don't know that the South is reeling. They just got word that Atlanta had fallen. General Sherman marched to the sea. He took Atlanta. That was good news that he revolted the North. But still, they don't see an end in sight. For the South, they don't have to win, much like George Washington's Revolution. They didn't have to win to survive. Just by keeping an army in the field was demoralizing and would make people in the North reconsider. So there was another party that ran in the North under General McClellan. If you guys want to step under here. General McClellan was the Union general at the early part of the war. And he was great at building an army. He was not great at using his army to fight. And so he was replaced, and then Lincoln brings him back by Antietam, and then replaces him again with a string of generals, until he finally gets a good one in Ulysses S. Grant, our future president, the man on the $50 bill. So McClellan runs against Abraham Lincoln. And so we don't have any polling, we don't have any data to know how is, we're going to head this way and we'll go to a trail that I've got carved in, will be easier walking. So we don't have any polling, we don't have any data that says how Lincoln's doing. But the perception in the North is not like it is today where we think Lincoln's this great president, right? They're seeing, 600,000 dead Americans, North and South. That death toll continues to rise to the end of the war to almost 750,000. So one of the key points for General Grant to Sheridan here is we want you to defeat the rebels. We want you to burn everything, barns, train tracks, houses, and this is called the burning in the South, right? It's still a topic here. This is total war. This is the Union saying, hey, we're going to put total war on the civilian population. So this takes place September, early October, the same time that I was telling you that the South was getting beat back. That was the second thing. The third thing, don't lose. And don't lose means that Lincoln and Grant were tied at the hip. They were great at communicating with each other, and Grant knew that Lincoln had political pressure and it wasn't guaranteed that he would win. And they were afraid a loss at this time, right before Election Day, would move the needle for McClellan. So just as we have a big election coming up for governor, they had a big election coming up, and it was just that October surprise. They didn't want that a huge loss had happened here. They thought that would move the needle for McClellan. So that's what's going on in October. The Confederates know this too. They think and they know that if McClellan gets elected, he'll sue for peace with the South. End the war, the South will be separate from the North. So it's important for them to get one big victory here to help turn the tide politically for them. So, Confederates at this time awfully undersupplied. There's a book that says half of the Confederates here were barefoot October 19th, 1864. So they're struggling to get by. They're undersupplied. They don't have what they need. Their cavalry, unlike the Union cavalry, the War Department gave them new horses. The Confederates, they got their own horses from their own farm. So when a cavalry officer's or soldier's horse died, they had to resupply their own and go home to Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina to get their own. So we talked about the election. We talked about the state of the Confederate Army really in tatters here. So as we navigate this field, it looks very much like it would have back then. These were all farmers' fields at the time. Wheat, apple orchards on the edge of town, corn in some parts. Belle Grove at its height had a few hundred slaves. And so this would have been part of the Belle Grove property. And this house that we're going to is called the Cedar House. And that's where we'll finish our tour and walk back. You'll get to check that out. So the Confederates formed this plan to attack. And it goes flawlessly at the beginning. It's one of the few times in the Civil War one of the 2 or 3 times, right, that Army marches overnight in the fog. They cross a river and they all arrive at the same time at their same location. And so really for the South, there's one other example at the Battle of Wilderness where this happens, Jackson's final victory before he passes. But this is one of those times so many things went right for the South in the morning. So in the morning, the Union Army is camped at Belle Grove, and that's where they meet Confederates that are attacking in the fog and the dark. The Union Army rolls up on itself all the way back down to the column. There's a lot of stories that come apart in that morning, and to your right you will see a green and gold sign. It's a Vermont sign. The only state of Vermont sign outside of Vermont is right here. Vermont lost 110 of 164 men of the 8th Vermont defending near here and on the cemetery on the top of the hill. So 110 of 164. And see, divisions back then were different than they are today. They were made up of localities. So this is a whole locality in Vermont wiped out. Fighting age men, huge casualties, 110 of 164. So this is hollow ground to Vermont residents. That was put here for our 150th anniversary by Senator Joe Denning. He was lieutenant governor. He ran for governor. He lost, but he's a judge now. So he's done well for himself. He comes back every year for that and to look at the monument. The 8th Vermont Monument is one of 3 monuments here in the battlefield, and it's on national park land. It's off of Clavin Lane, so it's just about a half mile up on the left. Check the time here. 6:12, we're doing good so far. Watch out for the rocks here. I got a trail up here, I promise, that'll lead you down.
Well, what's interesting, if you think about it, those rocks, they saw the battle. You know?
And there's a couple witness trees. Some of these sycamores
are
that old too.
Oh, wow.
That one on the right is.
That one?
And then there's one down there on the left.
Oh, that's cool.
So at the Heater House is my cousin. He's a Confederate reenactor, and my son, Charles Harbaugh V. So they've got the Heater House open for you, and we're going to check that out. So Confederates pushed the Yankees all the way through Middletown. The town was a battlefield twice. At that time, there might have been 50 homes right on Route 11, population of a couple hundred, 250, 300 people, Wayside Inn being the predominant feature. Middletown changed hands several times, just as Winchester changed hands 72 times. Middletown probably just that much. The Wayside Inn was an important location. Both sides knew it. It's what kept it from being burned, actually. So General Early presses his attack all the way through town. And then there's this term that you're going to hear, a fatal halt. The Confederates have taken 1,000 Union prisoners. They've inflicted quite a bit of casualties. At this battle, there's 964 dead, but there's 8,500 casualties. A lot of those are Union prisoners of war. So the South is taking prisoners. They've got about 20 guns captured. They've got wagons captured. Then they stop to steal stuff, right? Half the soldiers don't have shoes. Half don't have winter coats. Half haven't had a real meal. And they just passed all these Union camps where they were cooking breakfast. And it was too much of a temptation. So these Confederates were outmanned 3-1. And it's like a football game. In the first half, the Confederates completely dominated. Blew out the Yankees, and this would have been a great Confederate victory. It would have done everything they wanted, but this halt happened. And the Union commanders want to flee. They want to go back to Winchester, to Sheridan's headquarters. General Sheridan thought the combat in the valley was over and was in D.C. at a conference deciding what to do with his army. Should he move it to Petersburg to help Grant? So he's just back in town the day before in Winchester. He hears this battle and rushes from Winchester to Middletown, 13 miles, and there's a famous poem written about it. Everybody knows Sheridan's Ride. And really, Sheridan's the hero in the poem, but his horse is Rienzi. So Rienzi, if you hear that term, big black horse. There's a road named after him, Rienzi. Of course, Sheridan, there's a tank named after him, later on in warfare. So he's a short, stocky guy. He's young. He's 33. His Confederate commander counterpart, Jubal Early, is 47. He's a former attorney and politician. He's got a foul mouth. General Lee calls him his bad old man. He's one of the few generals that can cuss in front of Robert E. Lee and get away with it. Early had served well under Jackson, and had done well through the early part of the summer. But being down 3-1 has kind of gotten up, you know, that can go on for a time period, but not for a whole campaign. Especially when you're losing troops and they have to stay in the field, and the Yankees are funneling in new troops constantly. So that's one of the great points, is this fatal halt that you hear during the battle. And it takes place at the modern day college. Sheridan begins his ride from Winchester. He gets here in time, rallies his men, and it takes him about an hour to get this attack started. And it pushes, and he says, we're going to be eating dinner back in our own camps. And throughout the evening, around this time, this is when this happens. The Yankees push the Confederates back through town. There's another battle in the town limits, and then back through here and roll them out. And, you know, huge casualties. General Custer fought here on the western side of town, over here with his cavalry. They had a great cavalry. The Yankees in 1864, the Confederates was not much at this time. Two presidents fought here. Anybody know who? McKinley's one.
God.
Here's our
Why's the name?
McKinley, Rutherford B. Hayes. Both Union officers, of course, at the time, and they saw extensive action that day. And this would go on to help them in their political career. But they fought pretty valiantly here and helped the cause. Custer, of course, he goes to see a mortally wounded Confederate general. His daughter had just been born the day before. He was hoping to fight hard enough to get a furlough to go home. And he gets killed. His name's General Stephen Dodson Ramseur. Custer, in one of the moments of the Civil War that everybody talks about, there's a painting about this, goes to join him at Belgrove as he dies. So a Confederate and a Yankee who went to school at West Point spend his last moments together. He never gets to see his daughter. His daughter comes back, and there's a monument right up here that they built, the second of those three monuments that we have here. That's the Ramseur Monument on the entrance to Belgrove Plantation. So that's another interesting feature here. One of the other ones is during the virus, there was a popular thing that came about, and it dealt with mail-in ballots. And you heard that term pop back up in the news cycle, right? One of the first times in recorded history mail-in ballots happened here at the Battle of Cedar Creek. The Union officers wanted to make sure that they voted for Lincoln, but they couldn't afford to send them back to Massachusetts, New York, Michigan, and so they had them do mail-in ballots right here on the banks of Cedar Creek. First time in history, troops in the field are voting. So this is a thing that a lot of people don't know about, and that helped obviously swing the tide. Lincoln was very popular with his troops, and these were all votes, and they had remembered McClellan as being a bad fighting general, good at building an army. So that stuck with the troops, and they believed that they were heading in the right direction because of all these things in the valley. That's why they let their guard down, and they weren't expecting a Confederate attack. They thought everything was over here on October 19th, 1864.
But you do know it was only Republican states that it was only the Republican states that controlled the states let them mail in. The Democratic ones didn't allow mail-in ballots.
Yeah, that's correct. And so this is one of the reasons it became a national park. One of the last major battle in the Shenandoah Valley. There would be small engagements, but basically afterwards Lee had to call Jubal Early to defend Petersburg. And we'll touch on that here at the end. So right here you're seeing the heater house. We had a dendrochronology report done by Morale Colbien, and this was older than anybody thought it was. Anybody have a guess?
1820?
Huh?
1820-ish?
Not bad. Anybody? 1763.
Oh, whoa.
It was older than we thought. It has German influences, the Height family. Germans, okay? So 1763 was the original structure. The addition was added on in 1802. So at that time, this was part of a 3,300 acre tract. This was part of the Belgrove plantation. This was sold separately here in 1742, and then 1748 sold again. By the time of the Civil War in 1843, this belonged to a farmer from Loudoun County, Solomon Heater. That's why we call it the Heater House. He loses 2 of his 3 sons in the Civil War fighting for the Confederacy. And after the Civil War, damage was done to this house, and they got reparations, and they built that house. Monte Vista, one of the most beautiful homes
Oh,
in the
really?
Shenandoah Valley. Yeah. And that's on the National Register of Historic Places. They used to have big parties there for the reenactment. And his son, Solomon Heater's son, Charles Heater, lived there, and that's why they call this the Heater House. That's who owned this during this time of the war. So when we got a hold of it in 1985, it was in bad disrepair. People lived here till the 80s, believe it or not.
Wow.
And as you see, no telephone poles, no wires down here, right? So very primitive form of living. It was an African-American family, and there's a painting of it by John Chumley. Anybody heard of John Chumley? He was a watercolorist, a naturalist. He did great paintings and stuff in the Smithsonian. He lived in Middletown, and then lived in Vaucluse, which is halfway between Middletown and Stevenson. So he painted a picture of Calvin Gant, and he still lives in the area, on this porch. 70s, in the 1970s. There's a great painting. It's for sale in the gift shop at the headquarters. That's my cousin Phil Wines there, and he's opened this place up here for you. So this last year, we went through phase 1 of our renovations. This was to mothball it. The goal was to stop getting water in here, scrape the paint, repaint it, and it was about $32,000 in renovations. We have extensive work that we need to do. The bottom is safe for you all to go in and check out. The top is not. So we have about another 100K to go to get this to where it needs to be, and to get this open to the public. Our nonprofit is small. We have one employee. We have this reenactment as our major fundraiser, and so we're stuck between: do we preserve land because it's going so fast and housing developments and public pressure, or do we sink the money into this? So we're kind of, but we thought in the meantime, let's mothball it. And we had a great renovation guy. His name's PJ Stanley. He does extensive colonial homes, that time period. He owns renovation concepts. He did a wonderful job, and this place was in rough shape. You see the electric fence. This is a working farm. We keep cattle on here. So that's kind of the benefit of this place is it looks as it was. It's a working farm. And then for 1 week, yeah. Okay, yeah. it's a working farm. So that's kind of the benefits of 1 week a year. It's open to the public. You get to come out here, and this is never open to the public. So this is cool for you guys to see. So I won't hold you back. Please take a look at it, and then if you enjoy it.